On World News Tonight. Scotter scandal. Supreme Court clears way for House to get Trump's taxes. Meanwhile, Fauci delivers his final briefing before stepping down. Football fiasco. Two giants now in troubled waters with Messi's shocking Argentina loss and Ronaldo's betrayal over termination. Nuclear threats. Iran is upping the ante with new efforts at uranium enrichment causing alarms at the IAEA. And the holiday multiverse. New York opens a portal to another dimension that immerses visitors to festive displays.
This is Derana World News Tonight. Reporting from Colombo, here is Suzanne Shanali.
Good evening and thank you for joining us on World News Tonight. Now we start off tonight in the United States as the Supreme Court cleared the way for the Internal Revenue Service to release former President Donald Trump's tax returns to a Democratic-led House committee. The court's move is a major loss for Trump, who has sought to shield the release of his tax returns for years and is currently under multiple investigations.
The U.S. Supreme Court on Tuesday cleared the release of Donald Trump's tax returns to a congressional committee, handing a defeat to the Republican former president who had called the Democratic-led panel's request politically motivated. The justices denied Trump's emergency application to stop a House committee from seeing the tax records as part of its legislative work. No justice publicly dissented from the decision. The fight is just one of many legal woes Trump faces as he moves forward with another run for the presidency in 2024.
America's comeback starts right now.
Trump was the first president in 4 decades not to release his tax returns as he sought to keep his financial details and the activities of his real estate company secret. In a legal filing to the Supreme Court, the House Ways and Means Committee invoked a federal law that empowers its chairman to request any person's tax returns from the IRS. House Democrats have said they need to see Trump's tax returns to assess whether the IRS is properly auditing presidential returns and to gauge whether new legislation is needed. But Trump's lawyers have said the committee's real aim is to publicly expose his tax returns and unearth politically damaging information about Trump. Both a U.S. district judge appointed by Trump and the U.S. Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia also ruled against Trump in the case prior to the Supreme Court ruling.
After years of drama at the White House COVID updates, Dr. Anthony Fauci, USA's top infectious disease expert, gave a final briefing to reporters before leaving the government at the end of the year.
Dr. Anthony Fauci, the face of the U.S. response to COVID-19 since the beginning of the pandemic, used his final White House briefing on Tuesday to denounce division and promote vaccines.
So when I see people in this country, because of the divisiveness in our country, of not getting vaccinated for reasons that have nothing to do with public health, but have to do because of divisiveness and ideological differences, as a physician, it pains me because I don't want to see anybody get infected.
Fauci is soon stepping down as the top U.S. infectious disease official after 54 years in public service. His blunt assessment during the COVID-19 pandemic made him a hero to public health advocates while serving under former President Donald Trump, all the while making him a villain to some on the right. He has regularly been subjected to death threats for his efforts. Nonetheless, Fauci says he's leaving a job he was dedicated to.
I'll let other people judge the value or not of my accomplishments, but what I would like people to remember about what I've done is that every day for all of those years, I've given it everything that I have, and I've never left anything on the field.
His last briefing was an ode to vaccines.
Are the vaccines safe? That keeps coming up. The answer is now, overwhelmingly, it should be off the table. An extensive body of information clearly indicates that they're safe.
Despite leaving his post, Fauci may be called back to Capitol Hill for any congressional oversight hearings launched by Republicans next year, when they take control of the House. For that, Fauci said he would cooperate fully.
Defense chiefs of the US and China have held talks to discuss an array of security issues amid heightening tensions on the Korean peninsula due to North Korea's continued military provocations. At the meeting, which was the first time for the pair to meet since Nancy Pelosi's visit to Taiwan sparked tensions, the US Defense Secretary asked China to refrain from causing hostilities in the region.
The defense chiefs of Washington and Beijing sat down for talks in Cambodia on the sidelines of the ASEAN defense ministers gathering. During the 90-minute-long meeting held Tuesday, U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin and Chinese Minister of National Defense, General Wei Fenghe, discussed strained bilateral relations as well as numerous regional and global security issues. Following the meeting, the Pentagon described the talks as, quote, productive and professional, adding that Austin assured his Chinese counterpart of President Biden's commitment to the One China policy. He also underscored the need to improve communication channels between the two countries, which have ground to a halt following U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's visit to Taiwan in August. The Pentagon chief also called on China to refrain from taking destabilizing actions toward Taiwan. Lloyd also raised concerns over North Korea's latest missile launches and asked Beijing to fully enforce UNSC resolutions. While the statement released by China after the meeting did not mention nuclear weapons, it did state that issues such as the South China Sea, Ukraine, and the Korean Peninsula were on the agenda. The statement also quoted Fenghe as saying that the responsibility for the current situation regarding Beijing-Washington relations lies in the hands of the U.S. rather than China. Their meeting comes just over a week after a meeting between the presidents of the two countries in Indonesia. It's also their first since Pelosi's visit to Taiwan, which enraged China.
Over in the United Kingdom, King Charles hosted his first state visit since becoming British monarch, welcoming South African President Cyril Ramaphosa to Buckingham Palace.
Britain's King Charles welcomed South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa to Buckingham Palace on Tuesday. This is the first time Charles has hosted a state visit since becoming the UK monarch in September. Ramaphosa, who leads Britain's biggest trading partner in Africa, was greeted with the traditional pomp and ceremony. That included gun salutes before a grand carriage procession to the palace. Britain hopes the visit, which had been planned before the death of Queen Elizabeth, will strengthen trade and investment ties between the two nations. It's also aimed at showing the importance of links with the Commonwealth of Nations, the international organisation which Charles now heads. The state visit is the first to the UK by a world leader since that of former US President Donald Trump and his wife Melania in 2019. The last state visit to Britain by a South African leader was that of President Jacob Zuma in 2010.
Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky appealed to Ukrainians to conserve energy amid relentless Russian strikes that have halved the country's power capacity, as the United Nations health body warned of a humanitarian disaster in Ukraine this winter. Authorities said millions of Ukrainians, including in the capital Kyiv, could face power cuts at least until the end of March due to the missile attacks, which Ukraine's national grid operators said that had wreaked colossal damage.
It's 4 p.m. as the sun sets in Kherson, the city plunged into the dark and the cold. On a soundtrack of distant explosions, residents return to their apartments with a long night ahead. This gas stove will be the only thing keeping Irina warm for a few hours, along with her 4 children and mother. Her youngest daughter, Zlata, is just 2 months old.
In the evening when it's dark and cold, she gets nervous and disorientated. She's used to having some light, but it's constantly dark now, so she doesn't understand what's going on and sleeps all the time.
Huddled together, Lisa, Christina and their grandmother spend their evening watching videos of their past life. In the cold, the hours drag on. Bedtime come, the sisters curl up together under a duvet for another night in the cold. Across the Kherson region, workers scramble to repair the energy infrastructure sabotaged by the Russians. But it's a lengthy task because of an invisible enemy, landmines that have yet to detonate and that litter the fields. But despite the risk, workers press on with their repairs in the hope they can bring some life back to the region. Though some evacuations have begun in some areas of Kherson and Mykolaiv, regional officials say a total evacuation of the region is not on the cards yet, but that it can't be ruled out if this dire situation persists.
It's going to a short commercial break. More world news on the other side. Welcome back to World News Tonight. Now, following months of lobbying and political tensions mounting to new highs, the European Commission has unveiled the awaiting cap on gas prices. However, the formal proposal is only to be considered as a last resort.
The European Commission has finally unveiled a proposal for an EU cap on gas prices, but only as a last resort. After weeks of deliberations and mounting political pressure, the Commission presented a formal proposal to create a safety ceiling that would only be used in the case of high volatility on the market. The cap would only be activated if certain conditions were met, like if prices reached €275 per megawatt hours for at least 2 weeks.
This is not a regulatory intervention to set the price on the gas market at an artificially low level. It is a mechanism of last resort to prevent and, if necessary, address episodes of excessively high prices which are not in line with global price trends.
The market correction mechanism would be applied at Europe's leading trading platform, where gas transactions happen. But some fear it might just be cosmetic, as opposed to a real solution for households and companies. The cap bar is so high, it's never been activated in the past, not even during the last month of August, when prices broke records in Europe. Energy ministers will discuss the proposal this Thursday in Brussels. A big battle is expected between those who want a bigger market intervention, a majority, and those who are against, like Germany and the Netherlands.
Iran has increased its enrichment of uranium and the use of advanced centrifuges at 2 nuclear sites in response to a censure resolution passed against it at the global nuclear watchdog, the IAEA. The step was seen as a significant addition to the country's nuclear program.
Upping the ante in its nuclear program, Iran says it's begun enriching uranium to 60% purity at its underground Fordo nuclear plant in response to a resolution passed by the IAEA Board of Governors. The resolution orders Iran to cooperate with the agency's investigation into alleged traces of uranium found at 3 undeclared sites, claims that Tehran has long dismissed. The UN watchdog has also criticized Tehran for barring access to the sites for monitoring, especially since surveillance was removed 5 months ago. The developments have thrown another wrench in efforts on reviving the 2015 nuclear deal, which eased sanctions on Iran in return for curbs on its nuclear program, until the US pulled out of the deal under then-President Donald Trump in 2018.
The reason that the negotiations did not come to an end and the related parties cannot resume the implementation of the nuclear deal is obviously because the U.S. lacks political will.
Iran's enrichment activities have since pressed forward. The country's Natanz facility is already enriching uranium to 60% purity, just one technical step shy of weapons-grade level.
In a move that was expected by most, Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro has challenged the election he lost last month to leftist Lula da Silva, arguing votes from some machines should be invalidated, in a complaint that election authorities met with initial skepticism.
Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro has now formally challenged the results of the election he lost. 3 weeks ago, his far-left opponent Lula da Silva won the vote. In a press briefing on Tuesday, Liberal Party leader and Bolsonaro ally Valdemar Costa Neto presented analysis from what he called specialists, which found signs of irreparable malfunction in some electronic voting machines used in the October 30th runoff. Bolsonaro, a far-right former army captain, has for years claimed the country's voting machines were faulty. The complaint has now been officially lodged with election authorities, though they have responded to it with skepticism. A top judge on Brazil's Superior Electoral Court has ruled Bolsonaro's right-wing coalition must present its full audit for both rounds of last month's vote in 24 hours. Otherwise, he would reject their complaint. The top court has already ratified Lula's victory, and Brazil's international allies have acknowledged the election result. 2 weeks ago, Brazil's defense ministry found that there was no evidence of election fraud. A small but committed movement refusing to accept Bolsonaro's defeat has been growing. On Tuesday, pro-Bolsonaro supporters held more rallies against President-elect Lula, this time in front of a military compound. It's only the latest in the weeks since the vote, which have seen pro-Bolsonaro protesters blocking roads to air their frustration. Bolsonaro has told his supporters to lift blockades and find other ways to protest.
Saudi Arabia and much of the rest of the world are in collective shock following an unexpected win for the team against the tournament favourites Argentina. The win was celebrated by the country being allowed a public holiday on order of King Salman.
Now, in what felt similar to a home game, the match was attended by thousands of fans from Saudi Arabia, which borders Qatar. And they were joined by Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. Now, in celebration of the win, Saudi Arabia has declared this Wednesday a national holiday.
Cristiano Ronaldo's 2 spells at Manchester United are now coming to an end as the club suspended his contract effective immediately. The move came following a public falling out between the club's owners and the star.
Manchester United forward Cristiano Ronaldo will leave the club with immediate effect, amid a public falling out with manager Erik ten Hag and the owners. In a statement, the club thanked Ronaldo for his immense contribution over 2 spells at United, in which he scored 145 goals in over 340 appearances. The 37-year-old had given an explosive TV interview on the eve of the World Cup, in which he revealed that he didn't respect the United manager and claimed that senior figures at the club tried to force him out of Old Trafford. Ronaldo is currently on international duty in Qatar. He's set to captain Portugal in their opening Group H match against Ghana on Thursday.
Welcome back to World News Tonight, and for more news, let's take you around the world in a minute. 2 explosions at bus stops in Jerusalem's outskirts killed 1 and wounded up to 15 people in what Israeli police said appeared to be an attack by the Palestinian militants. A group of people were seen walking over down fence and pulling down barriers at a dormitory compound following a protest at Foxconn's plant in Zhengzhou, China. A rocket attack on the rebel-held northwestern Syrian city of Azaz killed 5 civilians and wounded 5 others, a nurse at a local hospital and a local activist said. Villagers in the north of Albania said that they feared damage caused by flooding would mean an even harder winter ahead. At least 2 people have died in Albania since flooding caused by heavy rains began to strike over the weekend. Defense ministers from the Association of Southeast Asian Bloc and its dialogue partners gathered at a meeting in Cambodia. Prime Minister Hun Sen said that the meeting played an important role in prompting mutual understanding through the open exchange of ideas. And that's all the news we got for you tonight. Join us again tomorrow for more news around the globe. And in case you missed to watch any of the stories we aired tonight, you can always rewatch by catching us on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/otherderana English. And we leave you tonight with a breathtaking holiday art exhibit that drenches viewers in an immersive festive spirit in the New York's Chelsea market. Thank you for watching. Have a good night.